She only asked me to fix her sound system, but the moment I heard her voice through the music again, I realized it wasn't the speakers she needed, it was someone who still remembered how her silence used to sound. The message came just after lunch, short, polite, and unmistakably hers. "Hey, could you help me set up my new sound system? I tried, but it's hopeless." I hadn't seen Claire in months, maybe a year. She used to be part of my everyday rhythm, a neighbor, a friend, someone whose door I'd knock on just to borrow a tool and end up staying for coffee. But life had gotten louder, busier. Work, city noise, distractions, all the things that drown out quiet connections. Still, the sight of her name on my phone made something in my chest tighten, the kind of feeling that comes before a smile you can't quite stop. When I pulled up to her house, the late afternoon sun had turned everything gold, her white porch, the climbing ivy on the walls, even the faint streaks of dust on my car windshield. The place looked the same wind chime by the door, the same faint scent of jasmine from her garden. It was a house that felt lived in, not staged, warm, a little cluttered, full of stories. She opened the door with that familiar half-laugh that always sounded like she was surprised to see you, even when she wasn't. "You're a lifesaver," she said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "This thing has more cables than sense." Her voice hadn't changed. Low, calm, with a trace of humor that made everything she said feel easier to hear. She was dressed casually, a soft gray sweater, dark jeans, but there was something about her posture, her quiet composure, that made the room bend toward her. Inside, the living room was scattered with boxes, instruction manuals, and an open bottle of water beside a half-finished cup of coffee. "I was doing fine until the wires started fighting back," she admitted, smiling in a way that made me want to stay longer than I should. As I knelt to unpack the cables, I could feel her eyes on me, not in a heavy way, just there. Watching, present. The air between us held that strange blend of comfort and curiosity you only feel with someone who once knew you better than most, even if you never said it out loud. "You really didn't have to come all the way here," she said softly. "I wanted to," I replied without thinking. And it was true. She smiled, a quiet, knowing kind of smile, the kind that said she understood more than I'd said. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. The sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting faint lines of gold across her cheek. Somewhere in the background, a clock ticked steadily, reminding me that time had passed, maybe more than either of us wanted to admit. When she handed me a screwdriver, our fingers brushed. Just a second, nothing more, but it felt like a small spark of the past flickered back to life. "Still the same," she murmured. I looked up. "What do you mean?" Her lips curved slightly. "You still fix things like you care about them." And before I could respond, she turned toward the kitchen, leaving me there, smiling to myself, surrounded by tangled wires, soft light, and the quiet hum of something beginning again. The instruction manual made less sense than a foreign language, but I pretended to read it anyway. The truth was, I was already halfway done, connecting the receiver to the speakers, checking the polarity of the wires, yet taking my time felt better. Every minute here had a kind of stillness I hadn't realized I'd missed. Claire stood a few feet behind me, arms folded lightly, watching. The faint rhythm of her foot tapping on the wooden floor matched the song playing from her phone, a mellow acoustic track, something soft enough to fill the quiet without intruding on it. "You've gotten good at this," she said, leaning closer to hand me a cable. "Didn't you once say you nearly burned down your old place trying to set up a gaming console?" I laughed. That was exaggerated. There was smoke, but no fire. She tilted her head, smiling. "That sounds like something you'd say to make it sound better." Her teasing was gentle, effortless, the kind that comes from knowing someone's rhythm. She didn't try to fill every silence, and somehow, that made me want to talk more. I kept my focus on the wires, though my attention wandered. Every time she stepped closer, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something light, floral, with a trace of cedar underneath. It mixed with the faint tang of new electronics and the warmth of afternoon air, creating this oddly comforting space I didn't want to leave. "You've been busy, right?" she asked. "I saw your company's name on that event downtown last month." I nodded. "Yeah, long nights, bad coffee, and a lot of meetings pretending to be creative." She chuckled, low and genuine. "You sound like someone who needs better coffee." "I sound like someone who needs your coffee," I said before catching myself. She glanced at me, her eyes amused but softer than before. "I still make it the same way," she said. "Strong and a little too sweet." There was a pause. A comfortable one, the kind that said we both remembered those mornings years ago when I'd stop by after a run, and she'd hand me a mug before I even asked. I shifted to connect the last set of speaker cables, crouched on the floor while she stood beside me. As she leaned over to see the receiver display, her shoulder brushed mine, a light, accidental touch, but my heartbeat reacted as if it meant something more. "Sorry," she murmured. "It's okay," I said quietly. And it was. For a moment, she didn't move away. Her sleeve brushed my arm as she steadied herself on the edge of the shelf. The small sound of her breath, steady, unhurried, seemed louder than the faint hum from the amplifier. When I finally glanced up, her gaze had softened. Not flirtatious, not deliberate, just present. Real. I realized then that helping her with a sound system wasn't just a favor. It was a quiet return to something we'd both left unfinished, not a relationship, not even a promise, just a connection that had waited patiently, somewhere between the wires and the silence. And maybe, I thought, as the first test note came through the speakers, that connection was starting to hum again, clear, steady, alive. The first sound that came through the speakers wasn't just a note, it was a memory. A soft guitar, faint vocals, the opening line of a song I hadn't heard in years. Claire froze halfway across the room. "Oh," she whispered, almost to herself. "That one." I smiled before I could help it. "You still have this?" She nodded slowly, arms wrapping around herself. "You played it when we painted this room, remember? You said it made the work go faster." I did remember. I remembered the streak of blue paint she accidentally left on my wrist, the way we laughed about it, and the quiet that came after, when the laughter faded but neither of us wanted to stop talking. "I didn't think you'd remember that," I said. She looked at me, her expression soft but searching. "I remember everything that made the house feel alive." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The song filled the silence, rich, warm, threaded with nostalgia. I watched as she drifted toward the couch, her fingertips brushing over the armrest like she was tracing the ghosts of old days. "You know," she said after a moment, "I almost sold this place last year." I turned, surprised. "Really? You love this house?" "I did. I do." She sat, crossing one leg under the other. "But after Mark left, it started feeling hollow. Too many rooms, too much quiet." She gave a short, almost embarrassed laugh. "I tried filling it with noise, podcasts, music, whatever I could find. But it's different when it's just you listening." Her honesty hit me in the chest, quiet but sharp. She didn't talk about herself like this often, she always sounded composed, grounded. Now, there was something fragile in her tone, a layer of truth peeking through. "I get that," I said. "Silence feels heavier when there's no one else to share it with." She looked at me, really looked. "You always did understand that kind of thing." Her gaze lingered, long enough that the air between us seemed to hum with something more than the music. I could feel it in my skin, that quiet tension of being seen. She smiled faintly. "You were just a kid when we met. And yet, somehow, you listened better than most adults I knew." "I don't think that's changed," I said, and she laughed softly. The moment felt suspended, like the afternoon light itself had slowed down to stay with us. The music faded into the next track, but we stayed there, caught in a silence that didn't feel empty anymore. Her eyes drifted toward the freshly connected speakers. You made it sound better than before, she said. I shrugged lightly. Maybe it just needed the right song. She tilted her head, a half-smile forming, one that carried both gratitude and something unspoken. Or maybe it just needed the right company. And with that, she reached for the remote, turned the volume down to a whisper, and let the moment settle, soft, steady, and impossibly familiar. When the last song faded, the room fell into a kind of gentle quiet, not awkward, but full of things neither of us was quite saying. Claire exhaled, her shoulders relaxing as if she'd just remembered how to breathe again. Stay for a bit, she asked suddenly, almost casually. I opened a bottle of wine earlier. It'd be a shame to waste it. Her tone was light, but there was something beneath it, a small, hopeful tremor. I nodded. Sure. I could use a break from tangled wires. She disappeared into the kitchen, and I heard the soft clink of glasses. The rain had started outside, a thin, silvery drizzle tapping at the windows. It made the room feel smaller, warmer, cocooned in sound. When she came back, she handed me a glass and settled beside me on the couch, her knees drawn slightly toward mine. The scent of red wine mixed with her perfume, earthy, soft, and quietly intoxicating. To working sound systems, she said, raising her glass. To the woman who keeps breaking them, I replied. She laughed, a low, honest sound that made something in me loosen. Then her laughter faded into a thoughtful quiet. She turned the glass in her hands, watching the rain through the window. I don't usually ask people for help, she said. I guess you know that. I nodded. You've always been the type who figures things out on your own. Used to be, she murmured. Lately I'm not so sure. There was a pause, just long enough for her next words to feel heavier when they came. When Mark left, it wasn't messy. It was just, empty. Like one day there was noise, and then there wasn't. Her voice didn't shake, but it wavered around the edges. I kept waiting for it to hurt in some dramatic way. But it didn't. It just went quiet. And that's somehow worse. I let her words settle. I didn't reach for her. Not yet. Sometimes listening was more intimate than touch. She smiled faintly, eyes still on the window. I wasn't sure who to call tonight. But your name came to mind before anyone else's. I felt that, not as flattery, but as something deeply human. The kind of trust that comes unannounced and undeserved. I'm glad you did, I said quietly. She turned toward me then. Her eyes met mine, and for a second I forgot the sound of rain, the hum of the speakers, the pulse of the world outside. Her gaze held something both grateful and searching, like she wanted to say more but wasn't sure if she should. Thank you, she said softly. Not just for fixing things. I smiled, but I didn't have words. The rain thickened, drumming steadily now. She set her glass down, her fingers brushing against mine, a small, accidental spark that neither of us pulled away from. In that moment, surrounded by soft music and rain light, I realized the space between us wasn't just closing. It was quietly filling, with understanding, with warmth, with something that felt dangerously close to longing. The storm outside deepened, rain against the roof, wind humming through the trees. Inside, everything felt slower, softer. The kind of stillness that doesn't demand silence but fills it with meaning. Claire leaned back on the couch, her glass empty now, fingers resting loosely around the stem. The low amber light from the lamp curved across her face, tracing faint lines near her eyes, softening everything about her. I stood to check the receiver one last time, mostly to give my hands something to do. The music had shifted to a slower rhythm, piano and cello, calm and deep. The kind of song that makes you feel more than you can explain. She watched me as I moved around the room. You really don't change, do you? She said quietly. I looked over my shoulder. That sounds like a compliment. It is, she said, her voice barely above the music. You still take your time with things. You still notice details no one else does. I crouched near the receiver, pretending to adjust the balance though it was already perfect. Guess I just like when things sound right. She smiled faintly. You always did. I felt her presence behind me before I saw her, the soft whisper of her movement, the quiet warmth that came with her nearness. She stood close enough that I could sense her breath, faint and even. Is it supposed to sound this clear? She asked, leaning just over my shoulder. Her voice was low, the words brushing the air near my ear. I nodded, though my throat tightened a little. Yeah. It's all balanced now. Her arm brushed mine as she reached for the remote, her sleeve catching the back of my hand. Neither of us moved. For a moment, the only sound was the gentle pull of the rain outside and the slow, steady chords from the speakers. I turned slightly to face her. Our eyes met, not in surprise, not even in hesitation, just in quiet understanding. The kind that builds slowly over time until it simply is. There was something in her expression, a softness that felt unguarded, rare. It wasn't about attraction, not exactly, it was about recognition. Two people seeing something familiar in each other that they hadn't realized they'd been missing. The light from the stereo glowed blue across her skin, catching the faint shimmer of her hair. Her hand rested on the table beside mine, just close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her fingers. I didn't reach out. I just let the moment breathe. She broke the silence first, not with words, but with a small, knowing smile. Then, quietly, she said, "You make the house feel alive again." I swallowed, unsure what to say. Maybe it just needed someone to listen. Her eyes softened. Maybe so. The room felt weightless then, the air thick with calm and something else, something fragile and alive. Neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The sound system played on, but the real music was somewhere between the space of our shared silence. Eventually, the music softened into silence, the kind that fills a room when the night is ready to end, but no one wants it to. The storm outside had eased, the rain now just a faint shimmer against the street. The world felt hushed, like it was listening. Claire glanced toward the clock, then back at me. "You should probably get going," she said, her voice reluctant but kind. "Yeah," I murmured, though I didn't move right away. She smiled, that familiar mix of warmth and restraint, the look of someone who doesn't want to break a moment that feels too rare to repeat. Slowly, I stood, gathering the few tools I'd scattered across her rug. The cables lay neatly tucked behind the cabinet now, the sound system glowing faintly, like a heartbeat at rest. "You really didn't have to do all this," she said, following me toward the door. "I wanted to," I replied. Then, after a pause, "It's good to see you again." She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture that felt more intimate than any touch. "You too." Her voice softened. "You always bring calm with you, you know that." I smiled faintly. "That's ironic. I never feel calm around you." She laughed, quietly, but it was the kind of laugh that carried through a person. She leaned against the doorframe, her hand resting there as if to steady herself. "That's not such a bad thing." The porch light spilled in through the glass, catching the edges of her hair, her skin. She looked tired, but not weary, the kind of tired that comes after finally saying the things you've been keeping inside for too long. As I stepped closer to the doorway, she touched my arm. It wasn't dramatic, not even deliberate, just a soft, grounding touch that made me stop. Her fingers lingered against the fabric of my sleeve, warm, steady. "Thank you," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "For more than the speakers." I could have said 100 things, all the small truths I'd kept to myself, but instead, I only nodded. "Anytime." Her smile deepened slightly, the corners of her eyes crinkling. "I'll probably find something else broken soon." "I'll be waiting," I said, and it came out softer than I meant. We stood there for a heartbeat longer, not moving, not speaking, the quiet between us as gentle and alive as any song. Then she stepped back, giving me space to leave. Outside, the air was cool and clean, the street shining with rain. I walked slowly to my car, every sound amplified, the click of the door, the hum of the engine, the faint echo of music still playing inside her house. When I glanced back, her window was open just a crack. Through it, I could hear the same song that had played when I first walked in, low, warm, familiar. And though I was the one leaving, it felt as if a part of me had stayed, folded somewhere between the wires, the music, and the memory of her saying, "No one else could do it like you." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a promise. It was something better, a quiet beginning disguised as a goodbye.